I worked with the playwright David Hare on a couple of things, in a movie and on a play, and he doesn't carry a cell phone with him or iPhone or any kind of device, because he said that he uses the time to wander around, just walking from place to place, to dream about things and think about his work. And he said, and that's where he finds his ideas. And I kind of loved it, because I thought, that's, I'll do that too, working on a movie or working on a book, that I'll go for a long walk or a hike or something and try to just not let any other thoughts come in, and see what I come up with. Because it is difficult. I see that with my children too. They come home with a homework assignment, and they have to. My son had to write a story the other night, and he did it beautifully, where he had to use all his vocabulary words. He had to use foreshadowing. He had to use a simile. He had all these things that he had to put into a creative story that was only supposed to be 300 words. And I was like, wow, he accomplished it. But it was a big task that we don't ask grown-ups to do very often. I'm certainly never asked to do something like that. My daughter had a homework assignment over the summer where they were supposed to read 2 books, then choose 1 book and write a book jacket. And do an illustration in the front, do a plot summary, write about the author. She was very daunted by this. She's going to the 4th grade, and we, after arguing a little bit, going back and forth, I said, well, let's learn about the author. What do you know about the author? And she's like, I don't know anything about the author. I said, okay, well, let's look her up on the internet, because of course every author these days has a web page, and there was a great and very entertaining description of this author's life, and we read it together, and I said, okay, what do you remember? And she's like, well, she's from New York City. And I said, yeah, she's from New York City. She started writing when she was, a little kid, yeah. She stopped when she had kids, so she basically heard the story and then was able to do it. And she was like, is that it? I'm like, that's it. That's what you did. You did research, and then you wrote about what you learned, not using their words. And so it's interesting. You think, well, how do you find a way to simplify it for children so that it doesn't seem like these words all come from heaven or something? They just come from people, and that they can do it. I talk about that when I talk to little kids about. I said, you can write a book yourself and do your own pictures, or you can do what I did. You can do, the words and have a friend do the pictures, and then you put them in the, and I said, that's it. That's all it is. At home, it's just, it's no one's interested in their parents' work. Nobody cares. But I do think that they're influenced by the fact that I've written these, and their father is a writer, and they both like to write things. They'll both, Liv sometimes says, she goes, sometimes I sit down to write and I can't stop. And I'm like, that's such a great thing to hear. Well, especially with computers these days, I think kids feel this sort of like, well, I could just keep going and going and going, and it's a nice thing to see.